Hi there to the students. Glad to have you for our next conversation in our Aspire series. I'm Danny Rubin, the founder of Rubin, and I am grateful to have Emily Thunstrom with us from Minneapolis, Minnesota. She is a perfusionist, and if you've never heard of that job before, perhaps it's new to you. We're going to learn all about it over the next several minutes. Thank you, Emily, for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule to educate us on maybe you would agree it's a unique job, a little bit of a different job. We know nurse, we know doctor, we know those titles, but perfusionist, does it sometimes when you tell people what you do they go, you do what now? What's the reaction that you get?
Yeah, every time, actually. Every time I've ever brought it up, people have not known what it is, but I've gotten anything from perfume to no clue, basically. But yeah,
So let's start right there. What is a perfusionist? What do you do?
first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Very welcome.
I'm really excited to tell you about what I do because it's pretty much the best career out there in medical field,
Wow.
in my opinion. And
Okay.
nobody knows about it. No one knows about it. The only reason you'd know who we are is if you've needed us, which is not ideal. But even then, you probably still don't know that we're back there in this realm. But so,
Okay.
perfusionist, the elevator version is we are the people that run the heart lung machine during open heart surgery and transplants. The more detailed version of that, which I think would be appropriate today, would be anytime that there's open heart surgery or open heart transplants, lung transplants, a lot of times liver transplants. You're going to go on a machine. It's called a bypass machine. And basically what that means is while the surgeon is working on the heart, they have to stop the heart. So we get to do that. We get to put you on our machine, which takes over the function of the heart and the lungs. So the body is not doing any more work. It's completely at rest. We get to cool you down. So we make you really, really cold. So you don't require as much oxygen, as much energy of any kind. So we make you cold. And then we stop your heart with like a high potassium solution. So you're not going to get it by eating too many bananas, but if you inject it into your blood, it'll stop your heart. So we stop your heart. And then when the surgeons are done, we get to restart your heart and take you back off our machine and let your body start taking over again.
Wow. That's some really intense description. You're stopping and starting someone's heart, for example, or another organ that the doctor needs to work on.
Yep.
Wow. Do you feel the weight of that when you're in the operating room?
Yes, absolutely. You feel it every day, or you should. We say you should never be comfortable at our job. You should get nervous every time that you do a case. And that's the perfect level. You shouldn't be too nervous that you're shaking, but
Right. I want to say not nervous to the point that you can't perform, just that nervous energy, that adrenaline.
yes, exactly. Most of us are, I don't know if adrenaline junkie is the best term, but we all do like a little bit of excitement in our lives in order to do this job.
Wow. And so when you are monitoring the bypass machine, that could be take several hours, right? The
Yeah.
heart surgery could be hours long. So are you just next to that machine, just watching it, monitoring for 6, 7, 8 hours sometimes?
Yeah, so it's a different type of machine than I guess what you would think. It's not a hands-off machine. It's very much a hands-on machine where have to physically be clamping and turning, and it's not a machine that you get to just sit and watch, unfortunately. So we are actively doing physical stuff the whole time. It's not to the point that you can't do it for 8 hours because yes, some cases do last 8 hours. It takes a really long time. But yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
Okay. So, like in the course of a surgery, are you just constantly like having to adjust things, like watching their measurements? And are you just like with every 10 seconds something's going on? I mean, is it like that?
So I'd say every 10 seconds you're scanning something. So you're scanning your machine, you're scanning the patient's pressure because we're affecting everything. We've taken over anesthesia drugs. We're completely 100% in control of the blood pressure, the oxygenation levels, all of your body functions. So we are testing that constantly. We're looking at your vital signs constantly. We're adjusting the anesthesia gas. So yeah, we are scanning constantly. We often are referred, like people relate us to the airline mechanic or the airline pilot, where when you take off, it's busy. And then there's kind of like a coast period. And then the landing is when it really gets a little bit more complicated. So it's very similar to that. In the middle, it's hopefully more of just like scanning and watching and making sure like everything's appropriate.
I see.
The start and the end are much more involved.
That makes sense. Takeoff and landing requires the most thought, maneuvering, logistics, all of that. I mean, turning their heart off and turning it on again just sounds like wild medicine
Yeah,
to me. So, how did you even learn about this field first,
yeah.
and then what kind of schooling did it require?
So this is why I'm really excited that you're doing this, because pretty much everybody out there that is a perfusionist knows a perfusionist or somehow got involved in a perfusionist. So it's not really well known. I found out because I was in undergrad and I was graduating and I did an internship. I knew I wanted to do something in the medical field. I didn't want to do so much schooling for med school, but so I went and did like an internship with cardiac rehab, and I thought that was cool, but it wasn't really for me. So then I went into the OR and I saw that, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And then it just so happened a family friend was a perfusionist, and they were like, you
Hmm,
should look into this. And I was like, yeah. And so I observed, and it was awesome. I applied to the school and I got in. The schooling. So there's 19 schools in the
that's what I
country.
was about to ask you. How many schools even offer this?
Yeah. So it's a very niche thing. 19 schools in the country, ranging anywhere from accepting 3 students to accepting 30 students. So not a lot. Um, and it's a master's program. So it used to be as low as a bachelor's program, but now all the schools are moving to master's program. So the 4 years of undergrad, all the prerequisites, the science classes and anatomy and physiology classes, and then it's 2 more additional years for a
So
master's.
2 year masters, and what is the master's degree called?
Um, you're Every school's a little bit different. You're either getting a master's in, um, most of them are cardiovascular perfusion. So that's like
Cardiovascular perfusion.
yeah. So we're perfusionist, but sometimes we're also referred to as a cardiovascular perfusionist. So my degree is in a master's of cardiovascular perfusion. Sometimes it's just a master's of science.
Okay.
But
Okay. And did you already have a job lined up as soon as you graduated?
so the job market's awesome. If you graduate, you're going to get a job. Because we're not very well known, and so I'll throw a little wrench in there. There's another thing that we do that's becoming very, very popular. And because of that, we're needing more and more of us. And there's just not a lot of people that know about us. And it's called ECMO. So it's extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. And a lot more people are learning about it with COVID. A lot of people needed to go on it. And it's basically like a miniature bypass machine. So it's a box like this big, but it'll take over the function of your heart and your lungs a little bit. Like it'll assist your heart. It'll kind of give your heart and lungs like a little rest. It doesn't stop them. It doesn't do anything like that. In fact, it's just kind of like taking over a little bit of the function of them. And that's bedside. But almost every program that offers ECMO, perfusion is involved. So there's ECMO specialists that might be a respiratory therapist or a nurse, but often the programs are run by perfusion.
Okay.
So our field is great. The job market, you will get a job for sure. But
And would
that's
you say
because
the pay is competitive? It's a very niche job, but does it pay well? You don't need to give specifics, but does it pay well in your estimation?
it pays incredibly well.
No, say no more.
You will
And
not complain about the pay. It's great.
okay, okay. And why is it still such a small field? Is this like new medicine? Has this been around for years? Is this fairly new? Like, why does it seem like there are so few people who know how to do it? What would you attribute that to?
So it is fairly new. I'd say within, I'm trying to think. So probably within 50 years. So a lot of the older perfusionists were all on the job trained. It used to be where they'd be like, okay, we're going to start this, grab a nurse or grab a respiratory therapist. We're going to train them to run this machine, and we'll call them a perfusionist. That doesn't happen anymore, but there are still people in the field that did that. So it is a very new thing within 50 years. Medicine
Okay.
is always changing. I personally am a pediatric perfusionist.
Hmm.
Um,
Wow.
so I work at Children's in Minneapolis, but there's centers that only do adults. There's really, really busy centers, and then there's really slow community type hospitals. So you can kind of find a job in whatever area you want to
Sure.
go.
One thing that we stress a lot in our curriculum and in our resources is the importance of communication skills and being a strong communicator, especially on teams. And there's no greater use of communication than during surgery when you are with a patient. How do you use communication skills with your team when you are in the moment, right? When the plane is taking off or coming down? How do communication skills factor in there?
Yeah, so everything in medicine is very, 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 communication is huge. What you're taught in school and what the surgeons come to expect is you're going to repeat exactly what they said back to them, and they're going to
Hmm.
confirm that. So they'll say
Give me an
something, you'll,
example of that. Give me an example of that. I
uh,
like that.
so just like, for example, going on bypass, they'll say, okay, Emily, go on bypass. And I'll say, going on bypass. And they'll say, okay, thank you, on bypass. So it's every single thing that we say is said 3 times.
Wow. So it's
We,
like a walkie-talkie situation almost, where it's like Roger that.
mhm.
They need and you need confirmation that you both know exactly what you're both doing
Yep.
before you do it.
Every single thing is said 3 times,
Wow. I think
word
that
for word.
is so instructive for students to
Yeah.
hear. That
Yeah.
three, and we have a worksheet that goes along with this conversation where we ask students to put interesting findings down. So having to say something 3 times is to me
Mhm.
the epitome of being a strong communicator, where there's no doubt that everybody knows what is about to happen. Because if you did something out of step, out of order, God forbid, right? You could
Yeah.
have something terrible could happen on the operating table. So,
Your patient's hands are like lives are in your hands. So there's no screwing up. And so it just doesn't exist. So if they said going on bypass, I could never and would never just say, okay, like that wouldn't happen.
and that's something that is drilled into you in your training and then reinforced when you're actually, working in the field.
Yep, exactly. It's
It's like,
expected.
this is like, so within your training, that master's program, how much time do they spend talking about communication skills as part of the job?
Well, so the first year, so it's 2 years, and the first year tends to be all classroom. And so it's emphasized over and over and over again. But then the second year is all clinicals. So you're in the hospital the entire second year, going to multiple different rotations and eventually pumping a case with an instructor. But yeah, so
Wow.
the whole time, since probably day one, we're emphasizing that.
And what is your weekly schedule like? What are your hours?
So that is the one difficult part of being a perfusionist, besides the emotional things, because things don't always go great. So you do have to
Yeah, I want to talk
understand.
about that too, but just start with your
Yeah.
schedule and we'll get to that.
So schedule, you are on call. So there's a lot of calls. So that means most places that I've been, it's like a 30-minute response time. So if you got called in the middle of the night, you'd have 30 minutes to get to the hospital.
Wow.
There's not so big centers. My first job was at Columbia Presbyterian in New York, and it was a very, very busy hospital. So somebody was always in house, but you'd get called in a lot for transplants. My job now is different. There's not so many transplants for pediatrics. There's still some, but most of it is the ECMO call. So somebody's here. This is kind of an interesting fact, but most heart surgery is planned. It's very planned.
Right.
So, most of our cases are 7 to 4 every day. So that's when most of your time is going to be. But you can probably figure 1 week a month or 1 week every 2 months, depending on your center, you're going to be on call.
Does that mean that you live close to the hospital?
You have to live within a half hour usually.
Okay, yeah, because there just can't be you can't get stuck in traffic, or you just can't happen.
No, no.
And then yeah, let's talk about the emotional side, because how do you compartmentalize, or create disassociate the job from your emotions? How do you manage that when there's some difficult moments?
Well, sometimes it's just really difficult. We've all had these specific patients that we get really close to, and things go horrible.
Especially children.
Yeah, being a parent, that makes it really hard. I really did that kind of backwards. I should have had kids when I was doing adults and not vice versa. But luckily, like hospitals, just like every other field in the hospital, there's a lot of resources there to go to. And if it's a specifically difficult case, like usually they'll come to the OR and talk to people and encourage you to talk about it. And there's a lot of phone calls and people you can go to, resources that the hospital has for that. But it is challenging. It's definitely one of the most challenging parts of the job.
How do you mentally prepare for each workday? You have a process. I mean, it's so early in the morning, but you got to be up early. How do you get your mind right to go in and do this work?
So I think everybody's a little bit different with that, but I personally will look up everything I can about my patient the day before. So the night before, I'll be doing all of my workup for the patient and really learning everything I can. So then the day of, when I'm setting up, I'm just like completely in the zone. I know everything that like I need to know about that patient. And then I can just really be focused on that and not kind of frantically like trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, I get that. The preparation is just as or more important, right, than like the moment itself. So let's say a student is watching this in their community. They had not heard of perfusionist 15, 20 minutes ago. Now they know.
Yeah.
They're interested. How can they learn more? Can they observe this even in any community in the country? Like, what would you suggest if they're even in high school? What can they do?
Yeah, so it's actually a requirement to observe before you can get into perfusion school, because they really want you to know that you know what you're getting into. So they definitely encourage that. I would say you can go to the American Board of Cardiovascular Perfusion website, the abcp.org.
abcp.org. Okay, thank you.
So that's the accrediting body, and they will get you in touch with somebody that can help, either that or the ACPE, and that's the accrediting body of the school. So that accredits all the schools. I'm involved in both of them. They're both great, and you can reach out to either one of them, and they will definitely get you in touch with somebody.
Okay, so you got to start at the sort of national association level, and then they'll find someone in your area that you could shadow.
Yep.
And because there's such a need for this position, I'd imagine that if a student actually reached out in that manner, they would do everything they can to get them kind of into the pipeline rather than just let the email sit there unanswered. They'll probably get responded to pretty fast.
You absolutely will. I can promise you will get responded. There's only 4,500 of us, so we are really like a small group. We all consider it like a family. So
yeah,
you will definitely get in touch with somebody.
Wow. This is fascinating. I now know what a perfusionist is. I think we all do. And so, Emily, let me thank you for taking time from your day to educate us on the field. I hope you've inspired students to explore this branch of medicine, this field, this occupation, and create more like you to come behind, right? And to fill
Really hope
these
so.
needed jobs. So, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.